Disclaimer, this show is for educational purposes only and is not an alternative for clinical counseling. Please seek a mental health professional for your specific needs.
Welcome to Intake Talk Show, where it's time to shine the light from a mental health perspective. We have real conversations about life, loss, healing, and hope. I'm your host, Bertha Barrett, licensed mental health professional and certified clinical trauma professional. If this is your first time here and you wish to support our mission to show how everything we experience impacts our mental and overall wellness, in addition to changing how the world views mental health, then please click that subscribe button below if you're watching on YouTube, or follow us if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform. In today's segment, I sit down with Dr. Monica Hardy, author, professor, pastor, and woman of faith, as she opens up about her journey through grief, caregiving, and discovering strength after unimaginable loss. This is part one of our conversation where Dr. Hardy shares her story of losing both her father and brother, the lessons she's learned about memory, legacy, and forgiveness, and what it means to navigate grief while still holding on to purpose. You don't want to miss this heartfelt and authentic dialogue that reminds us, even in pain, there is a path forward. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Intake Talk Show with your host, Bertha F. Barrett. Today's guest is Dr. Monica Hardy, a mother, minister, author, and all-around businesswoman. Today's topic focuses on grief and loss. Your Intake podcast starts now.
Welcome back to Intake. I'm your host, Bertha Barrett. And today I have with me Dr. Monica Hardy. Welcome to the show, Dr. Hardy.
Thank you so much, sis. Thank you for having me. How are you today?
I am well. Thank you for being here. So can you tell the viewers just a little bit about yourself?
Sure, be happy to. As just stated, I am Dr. Monica Hardy, born and raised right here in Jacksonville, Florida. I am a mother. I am a single mother. I have two adult sons. I work in, I call it ministry. I have a
Right.
business, Effective Enterprises, where I'm a professional writer and consultant. I have a ministry, founder of Monica Hardy Ministries International, which is an extension of my church, Love, Peace, and Joy Ministries, where I served as pastor for over a decade. That was in brick and mortar building. Monica Hardy Ministries is a virtual ministry. It's like a virtual church, if you will. In addition to that, I serve as a full-time online college professor for FSCJ.
Mhm.
I'm also an author of now 7 books, and I'm certified in biblical counseling, in mental health, in grief counseling, and I do counseling for caregivers as well. And I'm certified in my professional career as a health information management professional. And I just somehow, with the help of God, my business and the ministry kind of just blends. That's why I call it ministry.
I
Somehow
love it.
it just kind of blends. So that's under the umbrella of ministry. I have a women's mentorship program called the All Encompassing Woman, and you know about that.
Mhm.
It is in its 6th year now. I have a KISS broadcast, Kingdom Inspirations Scholastic Strategies, and I do, of course, evangelistic work and outreach throughout not only Jacksonville, Florida, but other states as well as international.
I love it. I love it. You are a businesswoman. Reminds me of that song, I'm Every Woman. Yeah, right? Okay. Hmm. Yeah, you doing it. I love that. Okay. All right. So can you take us back to the moment when you realized you had lost both your brother and father in such a short period of time? What was that season of grief like for you emotionally and mentally?
Um, when I reflect back on the loss of my dad and then the sudden loss of my brother, it was traumatic. The one word that probably describes it was alone.
Mm.
I never felt so alone in all of my life. Um, I can specifically remember when I moved from Jacksonville to Middleburg. And at the time, I did not realize that that move was totally grief. It was total grief. My family home right here in Sherwood, I've been in that was my family home, what you call the Hardy estate, if you will. I ended up having to sell my family home. It was not paid for, and it needed mega work. I mean, roofing, everything. And I had to make a decision. I ended up selling my family home because I let my home go move back to be with my father. And that what I thought was going to be a few months ended up being 5 years of my life.
Mm.
So it wasn't just a loss of dad and brother, it was a loss of felt like my foundation. When you have to really leave your family home, that's what it felt like. I called myself trying to get away from Jacksonville, but I was afraid to go too far. So I went right up the street to Middleburg. I was in the Fleming Island area. And it was a nice home. But during that year, I felt totally alone. I needed to get away
Mhm.
from this. Everything in Jacksonville reminded me of my family. And it got to a point to whereas when I sat up on the side of the bed every single morning, I had to literally write on a sticky note in big letters, Monica, everything is going to be okay. And I
Mm.
had to recite that every single morning when I woke up.
Mm.
That's the one major memory I have in that moment.
Mhm. Mm. Okay. What you just identified is what we call reinforcing in therapy, right? Because in grief, you go through so many emotions, um, and specifically in such a short time. Because if I'm correct, that was your only brother.
Yes, that was my only brother. And at times I grieve. I grieved my mom years ago. I grieved my dad. Then I had to grieve my brother. But I wasn't expecting grieving family, if that makes sense.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I went from grieving them individually to grieving them collectively. So it was literally the loss of a family unit, of your sense of belonging.
I get it. I get it. Um, that's a hard one. That's a hard one because you lost your entire family, right?
Yes.
Now, how did the passing of your father, especially with Alzheimer's, how did that journey impact the way you view memory, legacy, and connection?
It took me to it broadened my consciousness of health,
Mm-hmm.
rest, and it made me realize how precious life is. As as I began to dig into Alzheimer's disease, a lot is heavily rooted from the research into sometimes childhood trauma, the things we hold on to. My dad had a very strained relationship with his father, and he talked about it often in his Alzheimer's because his current memory was compromised, but his long term memory was in full effect.
Mm-hmm.
And he would constantly repeat things that his father did to him. And as I began to try to slowly walk him away from that and pray with him for the purpose of forgiveness, I realized that some of that attributed to the Alzheimer's disease as well as the loss of my mom. So what this did for me, when it comes down to legacy and connection and memory, it makes me want to practice forgiveness. It
Yeah.
makes me want to don't allow anything in life to be deep seated within me, because those are things that will affect your mind.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm. I love that. Okay. All right. Um, was your relationship um what was like what was it like with your relationship with your brother? And how did his death uniquely affect you as your only sibling?
My brother and I were not twins, but we had a twin bond. We were literally raised we were 2 years apart, but we were raised extremely close.
Mm.
I mean, as babies, mama probably put us in the same bathtub. She put us in the same. My auntie used to fuss about, take that shirt off that girl. He's a boy. But mom, she raised us so close. We sometimes shared the same crib. My brother and I were close. We were raised. My mom used to say, I have one boy and one girl. And she made us super close. And we
Mm.
were basically molded to take care of one another and support one another no matter what. Losing my sibling was traumatic. I
Mm.
mean, I spoke to my brother on a Friday. He was dead on a Monday. There was no closure. I wasn't able to talk to the doctors. So nothing made sense to me. My brother was a high-end RN and he was a nurse educator. It's my understanding that before he went down, he was in the ER telling them what to do.
Mm.
That made sense. But
Mhm.
him dying did not make sense. Everything about my brother's passing was painful. My drive up to him, to get to him, I went alone in the middle of the night. It was painful. When I got there was pain running through my body. Nothing, absolutely nothing made sense. Um, And my brother's passing was harder than losing my parents because my
Mm.
parents prepared me for them leaving, but nobody prepared me for my brother leaving. In my mind, he is supposed to still be here today. We were supposed to grow old together and have our family, but he's not here anymore. And that's probably the most difficult loss.
Mm. Mm. Okay. I don't think sometimes we realize that, right? Um, my oldest sister passed some years ago, suddenly. Nobody knew that she was sick. She didn't tell anybody, and she passed by herself in her apartment. Um, but we prepare for our parents as
Yes.
they get older. You don't prepare for your sibling.
No.
And I remember being at her funeral saying that, losing my parents was hard, but this hit different,
We get different.
right? It hit different because she was my sibling.
Yeah.
And she and I was not on good terms when she died, but still she was my sister,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
And for me, it was like my sister's supposed to be still here, right?
Yes.
Me and her supposed to be growing old
Oh,
together and
yes.
hanging out, right?
Yes.
And so that really hit home differently. And I don't think people understand what it's like to lose a sibling, but not only that, your only sibling.
Only sibling. It is so different. My brother and I on that Friday were talking about the family home. We were talking about what to do with the house. He really wanted to somehow keep the house. And I was going, okay, but how do I get my life back? Everything I have, I've invested into trying to keep daddy going and the house going, and I don't have anything. And we were trying to work through some of that. And we were not arguing, but when we hung up, it was like, well, okay, we won't argue about it, but let's talk about it tomorrow kind of deal.
Mm.
And eh, for weeks I went through. If I would have known that was going to be the last thing I said to him when I hung the phone up, I probably would have been like, well, I love you, you know. But we were in the middle of a deep conversation that day, trying to work through the nuances of our family home. And just for him to be gone, it was like, wait, we wasn't even done with that conversation. And everything that was on the table then fell into my lap. That was a reality I wasn't ready for.
Mm.
He was the historian of the house. He was the person that had everything with him. He probably right now got stuff in his computer about our family that I have no access to, but he had everything. So even when I went to the doctor, they would say, "Who in your family has this or that?" I would go, "Hold on, let me call my brother."
Mm.
But he's no longer here. So I fully understand what you're saying. It really hits different.
It does. Indeed, it does. Okay, you said a lot, and I know that you lost your mother several years ago.
Yes.
Um, did your mother passing in any way prepare you for this, or was this loss like entirely different?
Mama, she did prepare me.
Mm-hmm.
Mom, when I think back on mom's loss was hard,
Mm-hmm.
but mom knew she was dying. She had a full conversation with the Lord. Mom packed up her child care center. Mom packed up the church. Mom gave directions. Mom, she walked past me one day and said, "Okay, everything in the closet belongs to you. We wear the same size, so keep the shoes, the dresses." And we were in total denial. We were looking at
Mm.
her like, "Go somewhere and sit down. You're gonna be fine." We were not accepting. But mom, it's like she knew and she was telling us, but we were not listening. So mom's death was hard because when reality hit, okay, wait, you really died. You was telling us, but no, you're really gone. That reality was overwhelming after he
Mm.
died. But no, she prepared us. Now, as far as my dad, he had a disease. One thing about Alzheimer's disease, you lose people more than once. You lose them the first time to the disease, and then you lose them in reality. So the real loss of my dad felt like the first loss
Mm.
because I lost my daddy to this disease. He was not daddy no more. He was just this man who was actually very mean and he was not himself. But then then when we officially died and left the earth, it was just the reality that he was gone. So I had time to somewhat prepare for dad leaving. And as I just stated, my brother leaving was completely traumatic.
Mm. Okay. All right. What was it like in those quiet moments when you were by yourself? What emotions do you remember coming up the most? Was it anger? Was it sadness? Was it something else? What was that like?
One word, utter loneliness.
Mm.
Lonely. Um, I haven't very, even to this day, I have a peaceful life, but sometimes my world is too quiet. It's just too quiet. I know that may sound crazy to some people, but my family is small. So I was consumed with loneliness. I'm not married. I desire to be married again. But when you're single and you're unmarried, you don't have a spouse to wrap his arms around you and tell you it's going to be okay. In absence of that, you haven't built a new structure. So you're still clinging on to family things. But then your whole family is gone. So it was so quiet. I now turn on TV. I don't even like TV like that, but I turn it on for noise. I'm drawn to all family style pictures and I watch TV now and I put myself in that family. There was this movie on Netflix about horses. I forgot the name of it. But it was just about a family and they just had horses, and it was like a horse whisperer. I forget the name of it. But I literally almost felt like I put myself in their family every time I tuned in because it was a family. And I love anything that deals with family. I want to watch those style movies and I want to know who the grandma is, the dad is, the mom, and the siblings. And I want to see that interaction because what a lot of people realize is they'll say, um, you know, they lost their spouse, but they'll call their mom. Or they'll say they lost their dad, but they'll say, well, I'm finna go ahead and call my siblings. But what happened when you don't have any of them? So it was lonely. That was the one emotion above all.
Okay. Um, Actually, that makes sense. Yeah. That does. That makes quite a bit of sense. From a therapeutic standpoint, it does. It makes sense. Can you tell us what it was like um, caring for your dad in his decline? What was it like for you as the daughter watching the man who raised you now become dependent on you?
Um, it was difficult. It was extremely emotional. Dad was a strong man. He was my hero. I could rely on him and count on him in every way. And even when he was mean to the rest of the world, he was nice to me because I was a daddy's girl. So to see him decline, to see him fight himself, Dad would sit at the table and yell at himself for his mind going. He would sit and go, "What's wrong with you?" He was yelling at himself. He would hit his head because he was angry that he couldn't remember. He was a prideful man. He was tempered. He was very tempered. He would get angry quickly, you know. So he was a bit ornery. So he was the way he was. So when he wanted his way, he went to be that of a child again. There were days I had to reprimand Dad as if I was the parent. You know, I would have to say, "Don't say that. Don't do that. Stop it." And when that happened, I would run in my room and cry like a kid because I felt like I was disrespecting my dad. And that's a difficult thing when you've been raised to honor your parents. So I honored him, but it was very difficult trying to keep him safe. I had to keep Daddy safe. You know, Daddy would take a knife and try to open a can. Dad would try to get something out of the oven, but he didn't know he had to put on an oven mitt to do that. You know, he, and in his mind, he was doing all the right things. Dad will put food in his pocket to quote unquote save it for later. But because of his memory, he didn't know that muffin has been in his pocket a week and you can't eat that anymore. And taking that muffin out of his hand was a fight. So taking care of Dad was so challenging. And that's what led me to writing the book about becoming a caregiver.
Okay. All right. In this next question, that I'm gonna ask you, and we're gonna talk about that book too, because I think it's important for people to know, right?
Mhm.
I respect and honor the work that you are doing. And as a spiritual person myself, I think it is so important because sometimes even in grieving, in such a loss like yours, um, there is something that we can, get out of this whole thing and then give back, right?
Right.
And that's hard to kind of compute in your mind when you have lost, you know, your whole family,
Right.
right? One of the reasons why I do this show, not just because I'm a therapist, because I know how, everyday life can affect your mental state, right? I wasn't totally my mother's caregiver because she could care for herself. But as her baby girl, I was the one taking her to those doctor's appointments, keeping up with all her medical records, making sure she was okay, all of that. And watching her, because my mother was a strong woman, as it was we called it, right? Uh, and watching her realize that I'm getting older now, right? And my baby take me to these doctor's appointments. My baby's having to talk to these doctors and make sure everything is okay was definitely difficult. And I watched how it affected her.
Right.
So as a mental health professional, I thought it was important to talk about everyday life
Right.
things. And I didn't get that, unfortunately, until my mother passed. Right? And that was hard for me.
Yeah.
But I had to channel that in some way to say, how can I help people?
Right.
Right? And for my case, after that degree came, I was like, girl, you better use these skills and go and get this show done. Right? So I honor that. But what I want to ask you is, how did you honor your dad in those moments? How did you manage that emotional tension, knowing that you were caring for your father, right? And a spiritual man, right? How did you honor him in both ways, as your father, but also the spiritual man? And how did you deal with those moments, seeing him like that emotionally? How did you deal with that?
The first thing I had to do was I had to give him permission to be daddy and not preacher all the time. I had to see him as just a human man. He was daddy. I had to give myself permission to be daughter
Mhm.
because when we were home. Daddy was not able to do ministry. He's always a man of God, but he was not able to do ministry anymore. We did an emeritus status in the church to honor him. Mom said, and I could tell God really dealt with mom because mom said, even on her deathbed, right before she was rushed to the hospital, she said, you are to be the pastor and your dad would be the overseer. All that was going on in my head at the time, but it later made sense. She was establishing the order because she knew your dad is not going to be any good after this. He's not going to be able to do that. So, because I knew how much dad loved God, because I knew how much he loved mom, and how much he stood flat-footed with her in ministry, when those moments came up where he was being in his full humanity and being raw as he could be, but yet a man of God, that's when I turned the church music up. Literally. I would, when he was in the biggest rampage, I would get the music on my phone and turn it up. Because one thing about Alzheimer's is the memory goes in and out so fast. So he can be ranting, but if you shift him, he'll shift. So I would turn the music up and he's in the middle of a rant. I'm in the kitchen and I need him to shift out of that rant. And I'll just start hollering, woo, come on. We're going to have some church in here this morning. And I put on one of his favorite songs. And he would shift. He would forget the rant. And he would go into it. And he would even get up. And everybody knew my daddy used to use his fingers like this. And he would get up and he would start. And that would shift him back into the man of God, the overseer, the preacher. That would shift him back. I had to literally take authority of the space. But when he was in those moments, I didn't make it bad for him to be in those moments. He was human. He had a disease. And there was nothing scientifically we could do. But there was a way through God that we can take authority over them. And that's just what I had to really lean in on God.
Okay. So transparency. I have this list of notes here, right? I have these questions. But listening to you, I want to be authentic in this conversation. Let's just talk, right? I know you as Dr. Hardy,
Yes.
preaching machine, the
Ooh,
spiritual woman, always seeking on how you can honor God,
yeah.
uplift people, stay in purpose,
Yeah.
right? What was that like for you? Upholding that role, as some people know you as pastor.
Mhm.
Some people know you as this mentor because you have these women, this group that you can talk about, by the way,
Right.
where you mentor women. What was that like for you, after this moment of losing your family, dad and brother, the family you grew up with? Because we know you still have these handsome sons, by the way, right?
Mhm.
But losing that family that you grew up with, how did you balance all of that?
I went to a counselor after I lost my dad because there was a lot of things going on in my life, in my emotion. And I went to a counselor and she said something to me that was very real. It really did something, really opened my eyes. She said, without a doubt, you are a woman of God. You love God. She said, you are truly a woman of faith. We get it. And then she looked back up at me and she said, but you suck at being human. Thought, wow. She said, was that raw enough for you? I said, yeah, you kind of made it raw. She said, you suck at being human. She said, you got to give yourself a break. She said, you got to feel this. She said, it takes you back to that whining song. How can you tell somebody that God is a healer if you've never been sick? How do you tell somebody else that God is a light and you've never been in a dark place? She said, it's almost like you're afraid to feel. She says, like you're afraid to be a human being. She said, God is your restorer. She said, you're going to fail this. And you need to be okay with that, whatever that looks like. I got up once in the middle of the night and I literally felt like I had failed God in every way because I tell people, when you grieving will take you outside yourself. You'll find yourself doing things you never thought you would do. And that's real. And that's the thing Christians don't want to talk about. They want to make everybody think that in the bounds of the laws, everything was good. No, in the bounds of laws, if you were a drinker, I'm not a drinker, but if you were a drinker, you probably gonna drink again. Whatever your weak spot is, you might revisit it. And how do you deal with that when you place your whole life into the pursuit of God? But God told me one night sitting on the sofa at about 3 a.m. in Middleburg, I'll never forget it, balled up in a knot. And I began to scream out to God. And I said, I feel like I'm messing up. I said, I don't want to even do all encompassing no more. I'm not fit to mentor anybody. I'm not fit to do any of this anymore. And I think that was what we would call the counselor at the time told me, you're dealing with what we call imposter syndrome. I felt like I stepped outside of myself, and I didn't want to be that Dr. Hardy no more. I just want to be plain old Monica. Leave me alone. Don't ask me to pray. Don't ask me to fast. And that's the end of that. I felt like I stepped outside of myself, and I didn't know how to step back to Dr. Hardy. And in those moments, God met me, just like he met the woman Hagar at the well, just like he met the Samaritan woman at the well, all these well experiences. And I thought, and the Lord told me in that moment, he said, I've come to know you in a very real way, which is another winding song. I said, God, what do you mean? He said, now you get to know me for real. He said, now we're getting to know each other. He says, it's easy to know me when you preach. It's easy to feel that good. But when you can know me now, when you can allow me to pick you up in this place, now you coming to know me in a real way. And that's when I start falling in love with the woman in the Bible that committed adultery. That's when I fell in love with Hagar. That's when I fell in love with the woman in the well that had 5 husbands, and the one she was with still wasn't her husband. That's when I fell in love with them women, because some of them women describe me. And that's not something that the church is ready for, because they like seeing you, the preacher. They like seeing you strong. They want you unblemished, but that's not real. But God told me, he said, now you're getting to know me. He said, and you're going to come to understand who I really am. So now when I'm in my private room of all-encompassing woman mentorship, there is nothing my ladies in the mentorship cannot tell me and I'm not okay with. I don't care whether it's lesbianism. I don't care whether it's adultery. I don't care whether it's fornication. There's nothing they can tell me and I'm not okay with, because I have been through some stuff and wasn't nobody safe with me when I was walking through it. It was me and God. It was me and God. It was some difficult time, but they're the most precious memories I have. There are days I didn't want to preach. There was time I was called to preach after I lost my brother, and I begged to get out of it, and God told me no. There were times when I was asked to speak virtually, and I begged God to get me out of it. He said no. He said, because I'm going to repair you and repair your heart while you help others. So it was in those times that honestly, I came to know God. And that was what I felt like the worst place in my life. One day I talk more about it in detail, but sometimes I don't think people ready to hear. What's that TV show saying? You can't handle the truth. Because people only want to see you in one light. When we go through things, and grief will take you there.
Okay. We'll be right back. If you are a professional or someone with a story and would like to be a guest on the show, go to our website, intaketalkshow.com, and complete the form to be a guest. Perhaps you are someone with a question or comment that you would like addressed on the show. Again, go to our website, intaketalkshow.com, and complete the contact form. I hope to see you soon. And remember to continue to talk about mental health and how to make yours a priority.
This concludes segment 1 of our powerful interview with Dr. Monica Hardy. What do you think about today's episode? If you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment on the Intake Talk Show page. And don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify or your favorite podcast app, hit follow so you never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to keep talking about mental health and how to make yours a priority. Be sure to join us next week for segment 2 of this interview, right here on our Spotify page or the Intake Talk Show channel.